We live in a post-truth era. During the COVID pandemic, it would take visually disturbing slow-motion videos and carefully curated photographs to convince the public to wear masks. These disturbing visuals speak louder than numbers in spreadsheets and charts. It is similar when it comes to climate change. Climate change deniers would ignore scientific research and data and rather focus on the more exciting conspiracy theories. The so-called post-truth era challenges and undermines the efficacy of digital landscape architecture practices, which have largely relied on data-driven and scientific methods to produce knowledge and inform public decision-making. In this paper, I'm asking one question. What is our expertise as digital landscape architects in this post-truth world that values individual experiences more than digital data? I attempt to address this question by investigating a range of cases from digital art and design. In this teaser, I'll only analyze two cases. The first one is artist David Bowen's installation called Telepresent Wind. With this case, I argue that sensors are socio-technical artifacts laden with culturally specific values to understand and reduce the environment into a datascape. The installation consists of two parts. A series of tilting devices are distributed on an indoor gallery floor. Each device consists of a dried plant stalk connected to a tilt servo motor that can drive the stalk to tilt in any direction. The second part of the installation is a dried plant stalk connected to an accelerometer outdoors. As the winds blow, the exterior stalk sways, and this exact movement, both in intensity and direction, is detected by the accelerometer. This data is then transmitted to the devices in the gallery, and the gallery stalks replicate the exact real-time movements of the sensor stalk. Thus, the wind is displaced from outside into the gallery space. The question we should ask here is this: what constitutes a sensor? The actual sensor is an accelerometer, which measures acceleration on x and y axes. Therefore, technically speaking, the accelerometer did not record wind speed or direction, but instead evaluated the stalk's movement. Compare Bowen's sensing device with a 3-cup anemometer, commonly used in environmental sensing. We'll find that there is in fact no difference between them regarding how a phenomenon, in this case wind, has been transformed into data. A cup anemometer does not directly measure wind speed either. What it actually measures is how fast the cups rotate, and then translate that number into wind speed. In both cases, devices can produce certain behavior in response to wind. Then we interpret the phenomenon by reading the device's behaviors. Yet in order to read, a set of protocols must be in place to accompany the specific design of a device. Thus we can say that a sensing device does not innocently listen to a phenomenon. It is in essence a socio-technical artifact containing streamlined interpretation procedures. The only difference between Bowen's art device and a scientific instrument is that the latter is naturalized and legitimized by scientific communities over a long period of time. Media historian Bernhard Siegert formulated a relationship between mathematics and cultural techniques. The mathematical concept of the symbols is founded in the black boxing of history of cultural techniques, which in turn is a history of the articulation of the real. So I'm going to argue that sensing is an idealized way to read environmental traces with rules and procedures by naturalizing and streamlining a history of interpretation techniques that distinguish what counts as fact from what does not. With this interpretation of sensing, we as designers can reconceptualize sensing practices as ways to construct evidence and facts. Here, I'll only present one of 3 projects that I discussed in the paper. Dietmar Offenhuber is an artist and researcher who challenges the binary understanding of the information transmission process with a public artwork called Dustmark, conducted in Stuttgart, a city affected by particulate matter pollution in Germany. Unlike most environmental sensing projects that start with data collection and then visualize data with maps, this project constructs physical evidence of air pollution by turning people's attention to the patina on the city's surfaces. Using a technique called reverse graffiti, the installation crew strategically cleaned parts of the accumulated pollution on hard urban surfaces, such as buildings, bridges, and retaining walls, creating clean patterns of dots in different densities. And over time, these graffiti dust marks will fade away as particulate matter accumulates again on these surfaces. Many would argue that this art project is not digital. it may be pre-digital, since there is no circuit boards involved at all. However, this is exactly the point to discuss this art project. Must data be digital? Or what do we even mean by digital? Given digits literally means fingers, which has nothing to do with electronics or computation. At which point must digital practices be electronic and computational? Doesn't digital landscape architecture become a self-sanctioning mechanism that excludes other ways of interpretation? Here, I would argue that the artist deployed a very much computational way to conceptualize the project, with clearly defined parameters to remove the dust from the surfaces, forming patterns that classify pollution into 4 categories and ensure later dust accumulation to be interpreted in a quantifiable manner. The project is very much digital because it applied a kind of digital thinking to understand the physical world. Since my presentation is in the teaching of digital landscape architecture session, I'm gonna use this chance to reflect on what it means to teach digital landscape architecture now. In my design computation courses, I always tell my students that we should not only learn tools, but also the thinking that underpins these tools. I want to expand this by saying that what we need is a post-digital culture that can bypass the frenetic digital enthusiasm and is willing to understand what lurks behind the so-called digital revolution that we are in.